Welcome to Techiecast Jacks, where the top technology and business experts around discuss the latest trends in high tech. This podcast is hosted by Joe Holbrook, who's an experienced technologist pundit in Jacksonville, Florida.
Welcome aboard, everyone. Joe Holbrook here, the cloud tech guy, the host of Techiecast Jacks. I just released a new book, and I'm really excited to be talking about it because it's a book that really fills a niche in the marketplace. And as a technology professional, I have found that typically in the area of blockchain technology, it's either going to be focused on development or on cryptocurrency. So this book is really focused on providing value to enterprise organizations around how a blockchain can address the financial areas that typically a technology-focused organization will want to consider, such as return on investment, total cost of ownership. Also, the use cases and how the value can be provided to the organization. Now, excuse me. Now, as far as the definition of a blockchain, generally what I have found is that industry-wide, the definition of a blockchain is not typically standardized. And what I mean by this is different audiences really need to realize that a blockchain is really more than just a one-line definition. It really defines the organization's mission on what it's going to solve. So, for example, when it comes to mission on what it's going to solve. So, for example, when it comes to talking about a blockchain, I usually like to talk about the technical definition, a business definition, and a legal definition. So when it comes to a technical definition, I like to refer to it as a globally shared and secured data structure that maintains essentially a transactional back end, and it is immutable. When it comes to businesses, we like to look at a blockchain as more of a peer-to-peer exchange that some form of value can be transferred. And when it comes to a legal definition, it's really a corruption-resistant string of entries over a network that is shared by different parties. And it's really meant to provide essentially auditory and compliance requirements. When it comes to understanding why the blockchain is actually revolutionary, I like to also just sort of point out that blockchain overall, from a technology perspective, is really not revolutionary in the sense that the technologies have been around a while, and those are peer-to-peer networking, encryption, and also programs. However, the blending of this technology is where the revolutionary part really comes in. Blockchain is really more of a syncing of technologies, and what it really provides is the trust that actually wasn't there in the technology. So the technology is really, in a true sense, tamper-proof, and this is where the value comes in when we can go into an organization and provide value through trust, where we don't need to have intermediaries validating transactions. And that's where the blockchain is really coming down to more of a revolutionary format. Another area that I think is important to consider is that typically pre-sales organizations, systems integrators, VARs, and vendors generally do not really have the technical experience or actually the knowledge base, for that matter, in blockchains. And this is what the book is really focused on, is to provide value in that area. When it comes to sales cycles, we typically know a sales cycle from a technology perspective. And blockchain really does follow that. It's just that it has some aspects that are a little bit different than selling a storage array or Cisco switch. It really comes down to understanding that it's more of a development exercise. When it comes to pre-sales engineers, generally they understand how the technology works together. They understand how the sales cycle works. Generally, too, as part of the technology assessment, we want to, of course, understand some of the areas that we should focus on. For example, how do we prepare a solution? How do we go into an enterprise and actually do a whiteboard about blockchain? This is what it's really meant to provide value around. Now, when it comes to handling objections and closing the deal, that's areas that I also provide some insight in as well. I also think it's important to understand the RFP process. Now, request for proposals, of course, we know is typically a common procurement exercise that really needs to be done in a lot of organizations such as the federal government, state and local, educational, and even large organizations that are multinational. With that said, a lot of the experience comes down to really understanding and extracting from the proposal and addressing the requirements in a proper manner. How does the blockchain actually provide value to the organization? And does the RFP, does it actually address areas that the customer is actually looking for a solution around? And this is where I think the challenge comes in, because blockchain, being that it's less than really 5 years old for the enterprise, it really is hard in some respects to be able to translate that value to an organization when there isn't a whole lot of what I would call industry best practices put together yet. And that's really where the challenge, I think, can come in as well. So when it comes to addressing stakeholders, we, of course, need to identify, we need to analyze and manage our stakeholders. And as part of that process, we want to realize that every stakeholder, of course, is going to have what I would call different perspectives on what the organization is doing right now, but what the organization may actually need down the road. And so as a sales professional, a technical professional, we need to realize that sometimes we need to go into an organization and perform what's called a readiness assessment. This is a workshop that we're going to really sit down with the technical and the business leaders and discuss what exactly they want to basically come to fruition on from a perspective of what the organization really needs. We, of course, will provide insight into where we think the company needs to go, or what we can provide the company in the form of a solution, whether it's around compliance or whether it's around transaction processing or reducing, for example, overhead, whatever that value proposition is. So we may want to perform a demo, for example, or actually have additional basically workshops or training exercises to help facilitate the organization. Now, as far as bringing this all together, blockchain really is not exactly a one-size-fits-all, and I typically find it amusing in some respects, looking at a lot of the technology focused basically periodicals and magazines, etc., that blockchain is typically piped off as a solution that fits everything and can solve all kinds of issues and problems, from solving world hunger to solving, for example, money laundering issues, whatever that value proposition is. And the reality is the implementation is really limited. And I like to just sum up the podcast here with one thought. As any kind of technical professional or business leader, we really need to consider a few things. Our technology solutions that we're looking at really need to address the value in more of a laser-focused approach than sort of a wide target that we're actually shooting at in sort of a visual perspective. And what I mean by that is blockchain really is a niche area, and it really has limited applications in reality. So with that said, I really am excited here to have a fairly good lineup here in the next few months of some technology and business leaders that are familiar with blockchain and will provide amazing insight on Techiecast Jacks. With that said, I'm going to close it out for today, and I look forward to having future interviews and discussions down the road.